Hello all. Yeah. Okay, so today we are continuing our exploration of our power of understanding, which is one of our 12 powers. That power of understanding helps us both in our spiritual growth and awakening, and at the same time helps us to navigate in this human dimension, this dense physical experience that we have chosen to play in for a while, with all of its limitations and the emotions and the intrusive thoughts and the mistaken beliefs and the false stories that have been told to us, with all of that. So our power of understanding helps us navigate these choppy waters while helping us, reminding us of who we truly are, our divine self. So last week we talked about understanding ourselves, and today we're going to be exploring that wild territory of understanding others. A seemingly impossible task. But really, if we can make an attempt to we don't have to agree. This is not about agreeing. This is just understanding others. You know, it will go a long way to helping to create more peace in the world, right? So in Unity, we, talk a lot about our aim is to see beyond the appearance and the behaviors of others, and to try to see the divine self, the Christ within, the absolute truth of who that person is, right? This is really the meaning of namaste. When we say namaste, it is the divine in me that sees and honors the divine in you. And sometimes that's easier said than done, right? Particularly with people that we don't share the same opinions with, or act in ways that we feel is frustrating or triggers us, or maybe just baffles us. It's sometimes difficult to see the divine self in someone else. So the good news is that there are specific steps. There's a technique that we can use to get us there. So Marshall Rosenberg, who developed the technique of nonviolent communication, which we did a whole big book study on a couple of years ago. How many of you were part of that? You were a study group, yeah. It was really beautiful. And it takes practice, right? It takes constantly trying to remember these ideas. So he believed that behind every action, no matter how frustrating or even hurtful, there is a human being that is trying to meet a need. There's a human being trying to meet a need. And I remember when I first learned this, it was kind of early in acting class. Because in order to play a character, any character, you have to find what their need is, what their driving need is, right? And then you have to discover how important it is for them to meet that need. That's key, right? And it works because it's true of everyone. It's true of everyone. Fictional or real. Even bank robbers, right? So I was thinking about this movie that came out, oh God, was it the 70s, Dana? Like Dog Day Afternoon. Dog Day Afternoon. Al Pacino, right? He goes in and he robs him. He's not a bank robber, but he robs a bank. And he's not very good at it. And he sort of fumbles his way through. And then over the course of the movie, it's revealed that he needs the money to pay for the surgery of his partner who was transitioning. And this is based on a real story. This is like a real person who did this. And all the feds come and they have these scenes of negotiating, trying to negotiate, It's a really powerful movie if you haven't seen it. Anyway, everyone is trying to meet a need, no matter what, and understanding that is key. So, to begin to understand what the need is, for ourselves or for others, we really need to listen with our heart. This is what Marshall Rosenberg talks about. Listening with our heart. In other words, sort of practicing empathy. Practicing empathy. And the Chinese philosopher Chuang-Tzu, maybe I've pronounced that, Chuang-Tzu, yeah, Wei helped me with that this morning. He defined it as listening with your whole being. Listening with your whole being. Wow. How rare it is, right? To have somebody fully present, fully listening to us these days, right? That is so rare that when it happens, it feels almost magical. But to be fully heard, to be fully seen, to have somebody fully present with us, it's what we all crave, right? And so Chuang-Tzu continues, and he says, in order to listen with our full being, we must empty all of our preconceptions, everything that's going on inside of us, and bring our attention to the moment. Bring our attention to that other person. So, usually when we're listening to someone, we're maybe halfway listening. Maybe half of the time we're judging them or seeing if they're in alignment with what we believe or thinking about what we're going to say next, right? Rarely fully present. But again, there is specific steps here that we can take that will help us in this. And that's what the NVC process is all about. It's simple, it's straightforward, but it's not easy. It's not easy, right? But it becomes easier as we continue to practice it. So let's look at the basic steps of nonviolent communication. If I could bring up the first slide there. Now, this is for understanding ourselves. We'll use this in a moment to understand others. So the first thing is we observe without judgment and state what that action is, what the thing is, what the event is. The second thing is we identify our feelings, how we feel, right? How we're feeling when we observe it, when we experience it. The third thing is we identify a need or desire, values that connect with the feeling, that's really underneath the feeling. And then the fourth thing is that we take concrete action to fill the need. We either take concrete action or we make a request of somebody. Make a request that, as Marshall Rosenberg says, enriches our lives. We want to make a request that enriches our lives. All right, so it doesn't really become real until you put it into practice, and so let's go through an example. All right, so let's say, and we can just keep that up. So let's say I'm having trouble completing an important project, and if I can remove my judgment of myself from that event. And those of you who have done any Buddhist practices or you've studied Buddha, you are way ahead of the game, because that's kind of the idea, right? Is to witness, to observe something without judgment and attachment. So just going through this process kind of helps us in that. Okay, maybe naming it will help me, take a little space here and remove my judgment of it. And then, I kind of notice that, and I notice that I've got a lot of tension in my body. Remember last week we were talking about listen to the signals that your body is telling you. Have you been doing that this week? We said we would do that this week. Yeah? We can continue to do that. Listen to the signals. So a lot of tension. Maybe I'm having trouble sleeping. So I'm naming these things. I'm identifying what's happening. Now, let's look at the list of possible feelings. And we've got a slide here with many so many. I know you're going to have trouble reading this, which is why I made some handouts available so that you can take this and look at it. We're really expanding our repertoire of feeling here. We're expanding the repertoire, and I think the idea is the more specific we can be, sad, okay, sad. No, I am feeling gloomy. I'm feeling heavy-hearted. I'm, feeling melancholy. Just if we can get more specific and name it, again, it creates some space so we don't get overwhelmed and consumed by the feeling. It helps us. So the feeling that I might identify with this here is exhaustion, maybe, fear, maybe, helplessness, maybe a little bit of that. All right, so we identify the feeling, and then we want to identify with the need that is connected with that, the need that's underneath that. So let's look at the slide that has all of the list of needs. Again, this gets real specific, more specific we can get. What is it that I need? What is it that's missing? The need that is unmet, that if I had this, it would bring me into more harmony, right? It would enrich my living. So I would say to be understood, maybe. Peace, definitely. Ease, right? So I know that that's the thing that's driving the feelings because I've identified it. And now, from this awareness, now that I've identified what's going on, I can make a request. I can either request help from someone, or I can take a definite action, maybe extend the deadline. Right? So either of those two things that come out of my becoming more in tune with what I'm feeling and needing will help me get through this. Are you getting a sense of how this works? Yeah, okay. All right, so this helps me not only in understanding myself more, but also in communicating with others, the communication. Okay, so let's go now to understanding others. We're going to use the same process. So if somebody is acting in a way that we feel is inappropriate, or it's triggering us, or, something that's going on, we often make up a story about it. We talked about this last week. In the absence of facts, we can come up with all kinds of juicy stories about that person and what they're doing, and we assign motives to them that have no basis in fact, right? We've created the story, and now we're running with it, right? So we want to use the NVC process to first understand our reaction, what we're feeling about it, and also to ask them, to actively ask them what they're feeling and what they're needing that gets them interested in introspection and maybe, what is it? And now you've got real communication. So we'll go through this process. All right, let's take a deep breath together. All right, so we start with the first thing, which is to observe the action, to observe something. So let's say my partner is mad at me and yelling at me. Not that my husband would ever do that. This is just a theory. This is just a fictional story. So I'm observing that fact, right? All right, so maybe tune in. Okay, so this is the empathy thing. This is we're tuning in to our heart, to the empathy of the other person, and thinking about what they may be feeling. And we can ask. This is the thing. You can ask, guess, and you're kind of guessing what they may be feeling, and you can ask them directly, and then if that's not it, they'll correct you, and then at least it gets them thinking about what it is they are feeling, gets them thinking, reflecting inside. So I might say, well, I'm guessing you're feeling worried that I might get delayed and we won't make it to this event on time. Is that right? Well, no, it may be more like I'm just frustrated that you're not here right now. Okay, so now we got some clarity on what the feeling is. All right, we got clarity. And then now we go to step 3, which is we want to tune into the need, the unmet need that's behind that. What could that unmet need be? So maybe, and again, we're guessing, right? So maybe you need some assurance. Maybe you need some communication. You need more communication. Maybe that's the unmet need here. And again, ask, is that correct? And the person can say yes or no, and then again, it gets them thinking about what it could be, right? And then by this point, they usually, most people have already thought about a request, to ask. But if not, you can ask them, is there a request that you'd like to make? Right? Is there a request that you'd like to make here? And this really connects us with the basic need we all have, is to be heard, to be understood, to be experienced fully. Okay, so this whole process might feel a little cumbersome, and it is at first, but again, with practice, it becomes more natural. And just the idea behind the process, it's really the idea behind the process that gets us out of judgment. It gets us out of judging others as wrong or, bad or lazy or neurotic or whatever, story we're making up in our head. It gets us to stop making stories, stop judging, and then we are able to see that, there might be something behind this behavior, an unmet need. And it helps us to open our heart and connect with that. So it's empathetic listening. Empathetic listening is so healing for ourselves, for others, for the world. For the world, really, right? We're adding light. So let's now take a look at what doesn't help. I think sometimes it's important to name what doesn't help. And then we can go, oh, okay, this is clear. This is a communication style that's not helping. So maybe if I do this, this will. And we're all human beings. We have all done this. I'm telling you, we've all done this, thinking that we're being helpful for somebody. Okay, so let's say somebody is going through a tough time, or they're, really sad or depressed or whatever. So how we respond to them either creates connection or it destroys connection. All right, so what we're saying then and how we're being in our heart makes a big difference. So let's bring up the slide of the few ways that maybe don't always work. Giving advice. You should do it this way. If it were me, I would have done it this way. Not always helpful. The second thing is minimizing and one-upping, right? That's nothing. Wait till you hear what happened to me. So we are minimizing their experience And also, and I think, again, this is like we're trying to be helpful. Maybe if they knew what big thing we were able to overcome, that would be helpful for them. I'm sure that's where that's coming from. But they're not always willing to hear that at the moment, right? Educating, right? This experience will really be helpful in your spiritual growth if you let it, right? And that's probably true. It's probably true, but they may not be ready to hear that, and maybe not from you, And then, okay, the last one is cheering up, right? Cheering up. Oh, it's okay. It's not so bad. Let's look on the bright side, right? Let's look on the bright side. We do this all the time in New Thought. We do, because, either we're uncomfortable with the negative experience and feelings, and then we just want people to, we love people, right? We want them to feel good. We want them to walk into the light and to feel more positive and get into that higher vibration. That's what that desire is. And so we sort of skip over all of the process of feeling our feelings, letting them feel their feelings, and to sort of move through that process and then get there. So again, these are things that are not necessarily helpful, but what is helpful is to be present, to just be present, to listen with our hearts, to listen with our entire being. And then maybe, at that point, we may help them discover what the feeling is and what their need, the unmet need is. Okay. So this whole process, when we release judgment, we're making room for connection. We're making room for understanding. We're making room for understanding, and we can stop reacting to the story that we've created in our head and start responding to what is. We can start responding to what is, to seeing what might be behind that behavior and connecting with that human need that is not being met. That works for ourselves and for others too. And that's really, and we don't need to approve of their behavior. This is not about that, right? It's about looking at the need that's behind that and then bringing our humanity. And when we bring our humanity, that helps us connect with our humanity. And now we've got a holy encounter. Course in Miracles talks about the holy encounter when you're coming together, vulnerable heart to heart. It's a holy encounter. Okay, so breathe again. I want to ask you to think about somebody right now that you're having difficulty with. Somebody you feel is difficult. Maybe you're having a challenge with. Could be somebody in your past or somebody in your present, maybe somebody you don't even know, but you've heard of that is challenging for you. And then just turn within, close your eyes, take some slow, deep breaths. Bring that person into your awareness. Really see them in your mind's eye. And silently, just reflect on these ideas. What story have I been telling myself about this person? What story have I been telling myself about this person? What might they actually be feeling? What might they actually be feeling? Just allow that to bubble up. What human need could be beneath their behavior? So we've been talking about what the possible needs behind the behavior that drive that. What human need could be underneath that behavior? Take a moment and explore that. Keep breathing. What if this person is actually doing the best he or she can with the consciousness they have at the time? What if they are doing the best they possibly can with the consciousness that they have right now? Their level of consciousness. All right, and bring your awareness back. Now, this is not about excusing harmful behavior. And it's not about tossing our boundaries out of the window. And it's not pretending that everything's okay. It's not about that. It's really about, again, that last question. Seeing that every one of us does the best we possibly can with the consciousness we have at the time. Right? We are all on a journey of awakening. We're all on a journey of awakening, I'm telling you, trying to make it through this upside down world that's asleep and dreaming a dream of separation. People are in different places with that awakening process. So when we know that, when we can see that, when we can see the need behind the person, that really helps us open our heart, and maybe we can be part of that awakening. Maybe we can be part of that light, of that awakening process for others, and just putting that energy out into the world, right? Understanding it's ultimately love made visible. Understanding is love made visible. And when we practice listening, when we practice understanding, you know, we can help to lift somebody up. Not only are we changing our thinking and changing our conversation, we're actually becoming instruments of peace. We're becoming the instruments of peace. And we can see that no matter, you know, what somebody does, behind that is a person that is longing for the same thing that we are. It looks different, granted, it looks different for everybody, but behind that is the same basic thing that we're all longing for: to be heard, to be valued, right? To belong, to be loved. Those are basic human needs that we're all, people go about it differently, but those are the basic things. So we want to connect with that. You know, again, healthy boundaries. We're not talking about removing boundaries. We're not pretending everything is okay. We're just practicing understanding and practicing listening and opening our hearts and being that empathetic presence, bringing our whole presence, okay? All right, truly, let's say namaste to each other. Turn to the person next to you and say namaste. And then on the other side, namaste. That's what that is. That's what we're doing. We're putting it into practice, right? Okay, thank you. Hi, it's Reverend Victoria here. I'm at Unity Center of Peace with our house band, Bright Matter.
Hello.
Yeah, and if this video has inspired you or empowered you or opened your heart, opened your consciousness, or even just given you hope, we ask that you support what we're doing here by making a donation today, going to unitychapelhill.org or clicking the link below. And we thank you.
Thank
Thank you.